Welcome to today's episode of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Today we'll be hearing about Geo Tools like Google Earth and a handful of others from the Partial Credit Podcast guys, Jeffery Heil, Jesse Lubinsky, and Donnie Piercey. If you're familiar with their podcast, you already know this is going to be a fun one. Let's get to it.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Carrillo from the EdTech Bytes podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Hello, welcome in, duct tapers. And of course, welcome to any newbies who have no idea what a duct taper is. Well, guess what? You are a duct taper now. Just by pressing play on this podcast, you are officially a duct taper. Actually, there's one last step before you become a full-fledged duct taper, the oath. Please repeat after me. I, state name, pledge that I will listen to this slightly silly podcast and attempt to smile and laugh despite how insanely difficult my job is. I also pledge to hear the EdTech ideas and tools mentioned within and to not let myself become overwhelmed by them, but instead to add them to the toolbox of resources that I consider using in my learning environment. I also pledge to send Jake a large bag of Reese Cups or peanut butter M&Ms. It was worth a try, right? Anyhow, enough of that. So I've got a really fun interview for you today. I am joined by my first ever trio of guests, 3 dudes, the guys from one of my favorite podcasts, the Partial Credit Podcast. They are here for a part of a big podcast crossover celebration. Hear them, that's Donnie Piercey, Jesse Lubinsky, and Jeffery Heil. Hear them here now, and then hop over to their podcast and hear us continue the conversation there. I'm so excited to have them on my show, and I am so excited to be on their show as well, the Partial Credit Podcast. Next, a request. If you enjoyed today's episode, and I think you will, I'd be honored if you'd head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. It's that little piece of social proof that a fellow educator might need to turn them from a podcast browser to a full-fledged duct taper. And not only might your review help another educator make the decision to start listening, but it'll also help me. Seriously, this has been a tough couple of years for all of us as educators, and little things like someone telling you that you're doing something good really helps. So if you enjoy this episode and you could spare a minute, a review would put a big old smile on my face.
Hi, my name is Lori Guion, and I am Model Schools Coordinator for BOCES in upstate New York. I love the Educational Duct Tape book because it gives me actionable ways to get my students engaged in whatever it is that I'm doing, whether it's a professional learning session or students in my classroom. I can open up the book and see different ways to get my students to be doing activities, to be engaged in what they're doing. I can see how quickly I can flip learning by using different screencasting tools. It really is one of those books that becomes a workbook. It's not just a read from beginning to end, but it's a workbook for you to kind of open up and see what is it that I want to do with my students today or next week or next month, and you'll get some real actionable ways that you can get your students excited about learning. And really, that's what we're here for, right? We want our students to be as excited about learning as we are. So this is definitely something that I would say you want on your desk or on your bookshelf. It's a grab and go book that you're going to come back to over and over again because there's just so many amazing ways that you can engage students using educational technology.
By the way, did you hear that endorsement? I'd love to share one from you too, if you've read the book, that is. And a bonus, do one before the end of Halloween night, and you'll be entered to win a free copy of the book for you or for a friend. That's by October 31st at the end of the night here in the Eastern time zone. And links to sending in a SpeakPipe or a Flipgrid are in the show notes. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. 20,618. Men, shoes, sneakers and athletic shoes, filter, subcategory. Lifestyle sneakers, athletic shoes, running shoes, size, 11, 11.5. Price, under $100. Brands, Adidas, Under Armour, New Balance, $229. What was all that stuff? Well, I love using apps to go shopping, right? I never really liked browsing around the mall. And I love the Zappos app. If I go into the Zappos app and I click on men's shoes, there are 20,618 different options, at least at the time of this recording. Now, it probably used to be more because my favorite brand, Nike, used to be in Zappos and now they're not, which I'm not too pleased about. But anyhow, when I click on it, there are 20,618 different options. That's just by clicking men and then shoes on their app. But if I go into the filters, if I say I only want sneakers and athletic shoes, and then I only want things that are in the lifestyle sneakers, the athletic shoes, or the running shoes sections. And I only want shoes that are available in an 11 and 11.5. And I only want shoes that are under $100. And I only want shoes that are Adidas, Under Armour, or New Balance. Then I'm down to 229 options. Now, that's a lot of shoes, but when we think about shoes, we look through the shoes and we're like, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. For me, at least, 229 is a pretty manageable set of options. And apps like Zappos are fantastic at letting us filter what we want when we're shopping and what we don't want when we're shopping. We know it's in the Amazon app, it's in the Gap or Old Navy app, it's in most of the apps that we use to shop from nowadays. And if the filters are designed well, which on some sites and some apps it is and some it's not, they're annoying and the filters I don't think work very well. But if they have well-designed filters, it makes the shopping process much less overwhelming for us. Even though I like shopping and I like sneakers and I like shoes, I don't like to browse through 20,618 different shoes. That is an overwhelming number of choices. As psychologist Barry Schwartz says, all of this choice produces paralysis rather than liberation. You give me, and this is Partisan Schwartz, you give me 20,618 different pairs of shoes to choose from. I'm not going to be liberated and excited by all of these choices. I'm going to be paralyzed by all these choices. As Schwartz says, with so many options to choose from, people find it very difficult to choose it all. Yeah, I would just stop shopping, right? But if I use all of those filters, if I use the types of shoes filter, the subcategory filter, the size filter, the price filter, the brands filter, and then there's also other ones. There's features, there's width, there's color, there's closures, there's shoe weight. And I could pick things that I want or things that I don't want. I can apply all of those filters. And then when I'm done, I can narrow it down to what's 20,618 divided by 229. That's 1% as many options, right? Because 10% would be 2,000. Yeah, I've eliminated 99% of the choices, and now I'm just looking at 1% of them. That's a manageable choice for me. And not only am I not overwhelmed by that number of shoes, I'm going to feel confident in the final shoe that I've chosen. We all know a situation where we're shopping for something and there's too many choices. We finally end up buying something and then we question our purchase the whole time. Was this the right thing or was this not the right thing? Is this the shoe for me or is this not the shoe for me? I wonder if that other shoe would have looked better with these pants, right? If we have too many choices, then we're not even feeling good about our choices. Schwartz also said in another article that he wrote, increased choice decreases satisfaction with matters as trivial as ice cream flavors and as significant as jobs. Increased choice requires increased time and effort and can lead to anxiety, regret, excessively high expectations, and self-blame if the choices don't work out. Whoa, wow. And that could certainly happen if you try to choose from 20,618 pairs of shoes. You don't feel satisfied with the choice at the end. If we narrow it down to 229, then maybe we're more likely to feel confident about the choice that we've made. Now, why do I bring this up here on an educational technology podcast? Well, those of you who've been listening since the beginning, or maybe have read my book or have seen me speak, probably know why I'm bringing this up. I'm a big believer in the problem that the paradox of choice presents to teachers when they're trying to choose an educational technology to use in their classroom. If we say, what educational technology you're going to use this year, or what are you going to put on your, we call it in my school district, an IPDIPI, an individual professional development plan, maybe it stands for, I actually don't know, we just say IPDIPI. But if we say, what technology you're going to put on that plan, or what strategy you're going to put on that plan, or what thing you're going to put on that plan, it's really hard to choose because there's so many different things to choose from. And after we choose, we're not even likely to feel good about the choice because we're questioning whether we should have chosen the other ones, right? That paralysis, that's the paradox of choice that Schwartz talks about. And educators have lots of things that potentially overwhelm them, and educational technology is obviously the one that I tend to talk about. In his work, Schwartz talks about a study by Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper, also psychologists. You've probably heard me talk about this as well. But they did a famous study that people call the jam study. And what they did was they set up a sampling stand at a certain grocery store. And during certain hours, they had 24 different types of jam available for people to sample. And then at other times of the day, they set up a table in the same location with the same people working there. Everything was pretty much the same. They kept it as constant and controlled as they could. But at those times, they only had 6 varieties of jam from that same company. So same company of jam, same types of jam, 24 on one day, 6 on the other day, or it wasn't really days, it was just different times. So what they found was that people who visited the table when there were only 6 varieties were 10 times more likely to purchase a jam than those who visited when there were 24 varieties. 4 times as many choices, 1/10 of the purchases. All right. A quarter of the number of choices, 10 times more purchases. How huge is that? So for our educators, whether it's yourself or the ones you work with, the best thing we could do for ourselves is to find how we can narrow these choices down. Find those Zappos filters, right? If you find that you don't like the feel of New Balance sneakers, or you think that Converse sneakers are too flat-footed and you don't feel comfortable at the end of a long day of teaching, and you don't tend to like the look of Nike sneakers, or whatever your reasoning is, or you need wide shoes, or you need narrow shoes, or you like shoes that have high arch support, or you like shoes that lace in a certain way, or you don't like to spend more than $75 for your sneakers. The more filters you put into place, the easier your purchase and your choice, and most importantly, is going to become for you. The same goes for your educational technologies. You need it to work for a Chromebook. You need it to be free. You need to be good for elementary schoolers. You need to get good formative assessment data out of it. You need to be able to project it on the projector. It needs to have certain assistive technology features in it for some students in your classroom who need accessibility features, or maybe not even specific students. Maybe you just put a really high priority, deservedly so, on things like that. Put your filters in place. What are the filters that impact this decision? Put those in place, and the decision becomes much more manageable. Now, hopefully, you get to the point where you have less than 229 choices. For something like sneakers, that's a manageable set of choices. For something like educational technology tools, I find the sweet spot's more like 5 or 6. Anything less than that, we don't feel like I have a whole lot of power in our choice. Anything more than that, we feel overwhelmed by it. So we're hoping to narrow it down to where we're maybe as low as 4, maybe. So like 4 to 6 different things to choose from. Any lower than that, and again, we're like, I don't really know if this is the right tool for me. Anything more than that, we're feeling a little bit stressed out by it. But put as many filters in place as you can to narrow it down as far as you can. For example, if I went on to Zappos and I put all my filters in and one shoe came back, I'm not going to feel good about this choice, because I'm going to be like, I feel like there might be other ones out there that I would like, right? I need some to choose from. But when there's 20,618, I don't feel like I have enough power, right? Okay. So when we try to choose educational technologies for a lesson, or for a professional development to attend, or just something we're going to learn for the new school year, put your filters in place. What are your goals? What are your priorities? What parameters do you have? What's your style? What's your content? What are your students like? What kinds of technology do you have? What things are approved by your school district? I know that's a pain when the school district limits what apps and tools and sites can be used, but in a way, we can leverage it to put more filters in place. Maybe there's certain things we can't use. Those just eliminate choices, right? It stinks when it's an app that we really like, but otherwise, it just eliminates some choices for us. Okay, one filter I would like to put in place for podcast guests today is that there has to be 3 of them. They have to be funny, and they have to be super knowledgeable about tools that we could use for geography and maps and satellite imagery and things like that. So I'm going to put those filters in place. Beep, boop, pop, beep, 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 boop, boop, boop. Those are me hitting the buttons. Boop, boop, beep, pop, pop, boop, boop. Okay. It looks like we got the guys from Partial Credit. They're the only choices. I feel like maybe there could have been some better choices out there. I'm kidding. I feel really good about this choice. I feel very confident. Don't tell Barry Schwartz that I felt unconfident in this choice. I feel liberated. I feel excited about having the guys from Partial Credit on the show. So here they come right after this clip of my wife introducing us having a guest on the show. Here we go.
Today's guest.
All right, today is the first ever time I have 3 guests with me on the Educational Duct Tape podcast, and I think I might be biting off a little more than I could chew with these guests because there's already been tomfoolery in the green room before we started recording. But today I am joined by 3 Google Earth education experts, Google Innovators, Google trainers, and the co-hosts of the Partial Credit podcast, Jesse Lubinsky, Jeffery Heil, and Donnie Piercey. Let me introduce all 3 of them first, and I'll give you their bios, and then I'll bring them all in the air. So Jesse is currently the Chief Learning Officer of Ready Learner One LLC and has nearly 20 years of public school experience as a teacher and administrator. He is co-author of Reality Bites, Innovative Learning Using Augmented and Virtual Reality, and the Esports Education Playbook, Empowering Every Learner Through Inclusive Gaming. He is a frequent keynote speaker and presenter who has recently done educational technology presentations across North America, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and Australia. And then second, Bachelor number 3 in this game we're going to be playing today is Jeffery Heil. Jeffery has been an educator for 25 years, serving as a classroom teacher, an instructional coach, and an adjunct professor of education. In this time, he has continued to be an advocate for all students, especially those traditionally underserved by the U.S. educational institution. And last but certainly not least is Donnie Piercey, the 2021 Kentucky Teacher of the Year, who teaches 5th grade in Lexington, Kentucky. Donnie was the recipient of a National Geographic Grossvenor. Donnie, you're going to have to teach me how to pronounce that.
It was just
Teacher
gross.
Fellowship to Antarctica. It was just gross. A Teacher Fellowship to Antarctica. And he also represents Kentucky on the inaugural National Geographic Education Teacher Advisory Council. Donnie has been invited to keynote and present at schools in 33 states and on 4 continents. In 2017, he co-authored the Google Cardboard book, Explore, Engage, and Educate with Virtual Reality, based on virtual experiences he created for his students. I am right now going to get a drink of water because that was a lot to say right there, and I'm going to welcome the guys in. What's up, guys?
When Jesse told me that he sent my bio over, I didn't realize he sent all 5 paragraphs of it.
I would like it noted for the record that Jeff also co-authored the seminal book on virtual reality, the Google
And I believe
book.
I have keynoted on 6 continents.
And is North America the one you have not keynoted on, Jeff?
As a matter of fact.
I do, Jeff. Speaking of underserved in your bio there, you were a little underserved by that bio. I think Jesse sent the bios over, and I think he kind of burned you with yours. He took a few things on.
So actually, if there's a little story behind that, I messaged them this afternoon and said, "Hey, I need your bios for the show." And Jeff was like, "Can't you just get it from the conference this summer?" And I was like, "All right." So I just sent over what Jeff asked me to do.
It's actually
didn't
not
say which
completely
conference,
true.
though.
I was driving home from work, and while I was driving, he asks me to send it. I'm like, one of 2 things is going to happen. I'm going to get in an accident, or I'm going to end up sending a picture of a cat. So
Cat pics. Totally.
I said, can't you please just send the one from Changemaker? And that's when he got that same tone that he just took.
The word "please" never entered
he
the
took
text
that-
conversation.
he took that.
Donnie will back me up on that.
He said please to Siri, but Siri just didn't include the please. It took it out.
Oh, I love when you say please to like the Google Home and it's, it makes a little chiming sound, like a little reward. Thank you for saying please.
You get
They're
like 4
actually
tokens
they've
from
worked
Google.
on that. They changed the responses so that if you do say please or thank you, they reward you.
I think Alexa says like don't pander to me when you say please.
Well, I have Apple and Google products in the house, and I'm forever saying to the other one, "Hey Siri" or "Hey Google," and they get really snarky when you do that.
I've been having a problem this semester because I started teaching college remotely and I have an Alexa in my class. And every time I say Alexa, the Alexa goes on. And I'm wondering if other people. Fortunately, I don't have anyone named Google in my class, so that.
Jimmy Kimmel a few months ago, like he actually had people like turn up their volumes of their TVs, and he said like, "Hey Alexa, order 10 pounds of coffee or something from Amazon," and apparently, like it actually worked.
And did he pay for those? He should pay for those.
Probably not.
Probably not. No. Well, as you guys could tell, listeners, these three guys are the co-hosts of. You could tell listening to them chat and pick on each other that this is not the first time they've been on a podcast together. So Donnie and Jesse and Jeff all co-host the show along with other efforts, but they all co-host the Partial Credit podcast, which is a great education podcast, also a member of the Education Podcast Network, but one full of tomfoolery and fun. We like to laugh here on Educational Duct Tape, and we like to play games, but I think you guys definitely take the cake for the silliness combined with the learning. The learning is definitely in there. Was that when you guys started the show? Was it like, we're going to have fun on this show? Like, it's going to be a blast? Was that the plan?
I think so. I mean, I think the way we've come to view it over time is it's exactly, people have said this to us. People who know us have said listening to an episode of the podcast is like being in a room with you guys for an hour. And if we were all like on the road hanging out, and I think that's ultimately, we loved having the conversation, sharing the conversations we would have about really in-depth conversations about education and the world, but always with, sassing each other a little bit and some fun and some of those big pop culture questions we would always ask. Like some of those early drafts were actually questions we would often ask ourselves, like, so if you could make a school out of teachers from 90s movies, who would you pick? And ultimately, it led to a lot of laughter and said, you know what, that actually might make a good segment on a podcast.
Well, and
I remember that one actually.
When we started, we weren't really set on having guests because we thought, there's three of us, we're loud and obnoxious enough. But the guests have brought so much to the to the podcasts that we now, when we have to record solo, it's like I don't like you guys well enough to just be in a podcast booth with you. We need a guest. So we've had some really amazing guests, and I think really and to Donnie's credit, who was a teacher of the year, he tends to come up with some really fun games. My favorite of his stupid games is he'll pick random things from Amazon.
Yeah, that's the best game.
And we have to guess the price. And I suck at all of his games, but I think I'm undefeated in that game.
Yeah, Jeff has won that game, I think, 4 or 5 times. Like, just I have no idea how he does it, but like I'll find like a mock-up of like a severed hand or something, and Jeff will go, "Oh yeah, I've seen that before. It costs $17.98," and he'll nail it to the T.
Well,
don't know how he does it.
I love the way Google works now, because I think one of the first things he did was a puppet that a piece of the puppet went on each of your 5 fingers.
Oh yeah.
And it pops up in my feed often. Like I don't really ever want that puppet, but I'm kind of enticed by it.
Why is it popping up in your feed? Are you looking these things up to try to guess them?
I really wish I wish I knew. It's funny. I've been teaching a media literacy course to my kids, and one of the things we've been dealing with is talking about that. That, don't you find it a little bit odd that whenever you think something or say something, and we did tests in class and it happened, and it's kind of scary.
I think like any podcast, it takes a little while for you to hit your groove, but I'm happy that I feel like we've been true to ourselves this whole time. So Donnie had actually scored us an interview with the commissioner from the state of Kentucky, Commissioner of Education. And we were having this really serious conversation about equity and, the challenges of being a commissioner during COVID. And then, 2 seconds later, we're like, all right, so Mr. Miyagi, would he qualify as an administrator or a teacher if you were picking schools from 80s movies? And I just feel like, we've grown comfortable in our skins to have really difficult conversations that I don't know if we would have in the beginning. But yet we're still true to our kind of fun selves that we've always been. And I should say, this is actually a part 1, right? Because tonight we are recording the Educational Duct Tape podcast, but tomorrow our guest on the Partial Credit podcast for the kickoff of season 3 or 4 will be none other than Jake Miller.
Yeah, it's true. This is part one of the crossover event of 2021, or a crossover event.
Crossover event. Right.
Definitely fun. I'm enjoying because we have our cameras on. We don't always do that when we record because it's it's a podcast, it's audio. But I'm enjoying looking over Jake's shoulder. He's got looks like a Michael Jordan like basketball goal and a few other stuff back there.
Basketball to hoop, Donnie. It's a hoop.
It's a goal. It's a basketball goal.
They don't have a team in Kentucky, so.
No, do you want to use the word standard? Do you want to use the word standard? A basketball goal.
Basketball goal.
You make a goal when you shoot it in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Field goal.
Yep. My kids have been geeking out, or my son has been geeking out that Bob Ross and He-Man and Skeletor are back there.
Jeff's favorite is Bob Ross.
My son is going as Bob Ross for Halloween. I've never had a prouder father moment.
I love Bob Ross, but I watched a really dark documentary that was presented by his son about how the people that like supported Bob Ross essentially stole everything, and his son's like not seen a single royalty from any of this Bob Ross memorabilia.
Yeah, I have. I saw that advertised, and I saw some reports about it. I don't know if I don't know if I could stomach watching it because I don't want to see anybody being mean to Bob Ross.
Okay, here's a question: true or false? Bob Ross used to get perms to make his hair look like that.
Oh, I kind of hope that's true.
There's no way he just randomly said that. It has to be true.
I don't know. I'm going with true.
Yes, it's true.
Because I did read somewhere. Now this is on Wikipedia, so maybe we shouldn't trust it. That he wanted to stop doing his hair that way, but it became part of his persona, so he had to stick with it.
And he was also like a drill sergeant in the military. Yeah. And so after he got out of that, he's like, I'm never going to yell again. So somehow all of that came together to be this like white Frodo painter.
It's great.
It was amazing. We all love Bob Ross. Okay, well, I don't know if we need it, guys, but we're going to have a little bit of silliness before we start the actual educational duct tape party. I think we've already done that, but we're going to play a game anyhow, and we're going to play the educational duct tape version of the Newlywed Game. I don't really have a name for this game, but what we're trying to find out here is, do you three know each other well enough to continue being co-hosts of Partial Credit together? If you fail at this game,
do we need to vote one of us out of the podcast?
Yeah, I think that Giffen or Polishuk or Eric Kurtz or somebody gets to take over the third seat. I don't know. We'll work out the terms later. I don't know how your contract. I'll have to look at your contract and see how we can work that out.
And Jake, truth be told, we did this with my youngest daughter and Jesse's oldest daughter.
Okay,
and I won.
You won?
Yes, I even won.
Jeff wins all the games.
I won the game. I picked him answers that Jesse would pick that he didn't know Jordan would pick. So I'm going to celebrate that moment. So I'd like to claim immunity from being kicked off the podcast.
Okay.
I don't think it works like that, but okay.
We'll look over the contracts. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. So I'm going to have two of these gentlemen turn their sound off, or their take their headphones off, whatever it might be. And we'll keep Bachelor number one on the air. And I'm going to ask Bachelor number one two questions, or ask him one question, and he's going to ask about everybody, and we're going to see how accurate he is. I'm going to have to keep notes on my piece of paper here. I have my pencil and paper here ready to go Jake, to write this down.
Should the actual professionals wearing headphones take them off, or
yes?
Okay.
I feel like we're teasing somebody right now who's not wearing headphones.
I don't know who you're teasing. I think it's fine.
So who wants to go first? Who's our volunteer for first?
I think we said Donnie was Bachelor number one.
Yes.
Donnie's Bachelor number one. Okay, so the professionals with the headphones are going to take them off right now. Sorry, Donnie.
It's all good.
Donnie, I have one question for you. Okay, and the question is favorite 80s song. Favorite song from the 80s.
Song from the 1980s.
So I'm going to ask what your song is, and then you're going to try to guess for the other two guys.
All right, so we're going to go, for me, a song that it's okay for the first 3.5 minutes.
Okay.
But then when the drums kick in at the end, it takes on a whole new life. So we're going to go with Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight.
Okay. I knew as soon as you started saying the drums, I'm like, yep, it's In the Air Tonight. Okay, so that's for you. Okay, and then what do you guess is Jesse's?
What would Jesse's be? Probably something from Van Halen.
Van Halen.
Let's go with Jump.
Van Halen, Jump. You're good at this. You're quick to the trigger on this game. Okay, and then how about for Jeff?
I don't know if Jeff remembers the 1980s, but let's go. Gosh, I got to think here. Like Michael Jackson's Thriller. Let's go Thriller by Jackson.
Okay, now we're going to find out if you're right on those ones here in a moment. But in the Partial Credit podcast tomorrow, we're going to see if you guess my favorite song from the 80s correctly. So what do you think my favorite song from the 80s was?
The Power of Love, Huey Lewis and the News.
I do love some Huey Lewis and the News.
It's a great song.
It's the power of love. I can't sing it.
You got to start skitching along the back of a Jeep if that song's blaring.
Skitching along the back of a Jeep. Nice. Okay, so now we're going to bring on who's Bachelor number 2?
Bachelor number 2 is going to be Mr. Jeffery Heil.
Okay, Jeffrey, we're looking for. I'm gonna chat to Jeffrey here. I'm gonna put in the chat here. Jeff's up. Okay.
All right, I'm vanishing now.
No, you could say it. You could say on. You could hear what happens here. You could say it with us, Donnie.
I won't make a comment.
All right, Jeff. Welcome back in. How was your time in the green room?
It was lovely.
Did you try the scones while you were in there?
I did, as a matter of fact.
Good. Did you like them?
They were a little hard, to be honest.
A little hard. Okay. All right, Jeff. My question for you is favorite 80s song. So first, I want to hear your favorite 80s song.
Wow. My favorite 80s song would have to be something by the Smiths, probably How Soon Is Now.
Wow, you're going indie, huh? I never really listened to the Smiths. I'm impressed with that. That is not what Donnie guessed for you. I'll tell you what Donnie guessed for you in a minute. Okay, what do you think Donnie's favorite one is?
I knew his favorite 90s song. I was hoping you would ask that, but Donnie was like 3 in the 80s, so I'm trying to remember.
He is the youngest of the 4 of us here.
So he doesn't have a real song. It's like a retrospective.
Hey, I'm going to jump in here. I was born in 82. Thank you very much. I'm almost 40. All right, back to the green room.
His favorite 80s song, and we can't pick Bob Dylan, so I would go with probably Dexy's Midnight Runner, Come On Eileen.
Nice.
Because I've seen him wear those the same overalls that the singer wore in the video.
I believe that. I totally believe that. Okay, how about Jesse?
Jesse's favorite 80s song?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Jesse's favorite 80s song. Oh man. Got to be Cyndi Lauper. She's a New Yorker. Girls
just want to have fun, right? Yeah, time after time.
Time after time, because that's what it's like.
If he says that one is his favorite, that would be amazing. Okay, now in a lead up to my time on the Partial Credit podcast, what do you think my favorite 80s song is?
Jake from Cleveland.
Yeah, that's accurate.
I would go with probably a Duran Duran.
Okay.
Hungry Like the Wolf.
Hungry Like the Wolf. You guys are good at pulling out these songs. Like it's pretty impressive that you guys can name these songs right now. Because some people would just sit there like, I don't remember any songs from them.
I'm not going to pretend it wasn't a struggle.
Yeah, Jeff was in his mid 40s in the 80s, so he was hitting his prime.
No, it's a burn.
I graduated from high school the year after Donnie was born. So.
No. All right, Jesse, you ready?
Yeah.
Did you try the scones in the break room or in the green room? I mean,
amazing. By the way,
they were amazing.
I'm hoping to get the recipe for the cranberry orange.
Okay, I will talk to my wife about that. I will send that your way. Yeah. I've got it pinned on Pinterest, so I'll send you a pin.
Okay.
All right, Jesse. My question is favorite 80s song. So first, I want to hear your favorite 80s song, and we're gonna see if either Donnie or Jeff got it.
We have not had this discussion on the Partial Credit podcast. Donnie and I often have these talks about the most quintessential 80s and 90s
I could
song.
do the 90s, yeah.
The 90s song, I think, ad nauseum we've argued.
Okay,
about
real
this.
quick, Jesse, what would I've picked for favorite song of the 1990s?
Well, Another Night by Real McCoy. No, it would have been what's the other one? I know we've argued. I've said Ironic, but you've said something else.
So Ironic is the most
He
90s
says Ironic. I
song.
say it
It's
smells
the
like
most
Teen
90s
Spirit.
song.
It smells like
But-
Teen Spirit.
Okay, well, discussion for another time. So I'm going to go. So for my favorite 80s song, there's so many good ones. I'm just going to go with what I think is the most quintessential 80s song, and it's a song that actually got me in trouble on Twitter a few months ago. It is Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears.
Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears. Well, Jesse, your knowledge of 80s music is impressive, but your friend's knowledge of you is not, because they guessed that it was either Donnie guessed it was Jump by Van Halen,
Oh my god!
and
Terrible.
and Jeff guessed that it was Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper.
I love that song, but that wasn't it.
All right, Jesse, what do you think that Donnie's favorite song from the 80s is?
Donnie's favorite song from the 80s. It's Hip to Be Square.
Is that Huey Lewis in the News?
It is.
Donnie
Who
is.
actually-
I could say Donnie is a big Huey Lewis in the News
Yeah.
fan.
Who played at my grad night, by the way, just so we're along with
Okay.
Berlin and the Gap Band.
So Donnie, as you know, the guesses for you were Hip to Be Square and Dexy's Midnight Runners. Come on, Eileen. But Donnie's favorite song here. Let me give you what Donnie said. Donnie said that the song is pretty good for 3.5 minutes, and then when the drums start, it becomes the best song of the 80s. Do you know what song he said?
Oh,
Phil
it's
Collins. In the Air Tonight.
In
In the Air Tonight.
Yeah.
Phil Collins.
In the Air Tonight.
Yeah. Okay.
That was Donnie's. All right. So Jesse, what do you think Jeff's favorite song of the 80s was?
The 1980s. We're talking.
Yeah, that's what I said. Jeff was in his mid 40s.
Mid 40s and 1880s. Jeff's favorite song of the 80s.
That's incorrect.
No, it's I'm going to go with an Elvis Costello song. I'm just not sure which one I want to go with. Oh wait, no. I'm going to go with "Stepping Out" by Joe Jackson.
By Joe Jackson. I don't even know what that song is.
That's when
You
Joe,
do. You just
that's
don't.
when- That's when Joe hit the piano. The
I
best
need,
album by
um,
Joe Jackson was Look Sharp.
Yeah.
I need somebody
That
to
was
make the Spotify playlist for us for this episode for the 12
Done.
songs that were named.
Jeff's
right?
already on it.
Fun fact about Jeffrey Heil. Jeffrey Heil wound up living in San Diego because he was following Elvis Costello around on tour, stopped in San Diego, was like, oh, wow, it's whatever Jeff would have said back then. It's pretty groovy out here. And then wound up staying in San Diego.
I had the Flock of Seagulls mullet
right.
thing that like covered one of my eyes.
No, you didn't.
I did. I really did.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So you guys were both wrong on Jeff. It was not a Joe Jackson song, although he did seem to appreciate that choice there. So Jeff, Donnie guessed that your favorite song in the 80s was Thriller.
Of course he did.
Jeff just died a little inside when I said that. And Jeff's actual favorite song was a song by the Smiths, which I know of the Smiths, but I did not know the song. How soon is what? How soon is something?
Now.
How soon is
Yeah.
now?
Oh, that's a great song.
All right. And to finish us off, Jesse, what
Maz.
do you think my favorite song of the 80s was?
Oh, well, that's easy, man. The Heart of Rock and Roll is in Cleveland.
Heart of it should be
It's,
my favorite song. You guys really have me pegged for a Huey Lewis guy.
Oh, wait, did they say Huey Lewis also?
That's two
I
of the
did.
three guesses.
Yeah,
are
I did. I went with Huey Lewis.
Did you say Power of Love?
yes, that's his guess for me.
So I was able to guess Dottie's guess for Jake.
Right.
That's what
Okay.
I was able to guess. Okay.
Well, guess what, guys? You got 0 out of 9 right of guessing each other's favorite songs. But guess what I'm going to give you right now? I am going to give you partial credit because it was fun.
Oh,
There you go.
there we go.
Right?
I
I
like
really
it.
thought you were going to say a hint.
That was great.
Taking a hint.
All right, let's do some actual educational duct tape for the 3 people who are still listening right now. So for anybody who might be a new listener to the show, educational duct tape is the time when or the idea of thinking about what we do in the classrooms and how we use educational technology as the technology is a tool. We start with a question or a problem or a goal, and then we identify the duct tape, the tool that solves that problem for us. So I like to start with a question a teacher might have and then try to identify the technology tools that might be the answer for them. So based on what I read at the beginning of your bios earlier, I said you three are all Google Earth education experts. So certainly you guys have a lot of expertise and different tools that we could use in the geo sphere, right? Using geography tools and tools for seeing different areas of the Earth and things like that, which is perfect for me because as an 8th grade science teacher, I am currently teaching erosion and deposition and different landforms that it causes. And later I'll be teaching plate tectonics and all that kind of stuff. So I'm eager to take some notes for myself here too. And I'm sure a lot of different listeners, whether they teach science or social studies or language arts and maybe teach some different books that are located in different regions, would love to hear about these different things. And obviously there's other classrooms that might care about this kind of stuff too. So what I want to know is, what is the best tool for a teacher to use for exposing their students to maybe different geographical areas using technology, areas that they can't just go out on a field trip of and maybe we'll never travel to, but we can expose them to them using technology. So who wants to volunteer to go first here with an answer here?
Would it be fair? Would it be fair? I was about to say, would it be fair to say we're all going to say Earth to some degree?
Yeah.
Because I feel like
So tell me with Google Earth, like what's maybe let's talk about, let's just riff on Google Earth a little bit about what some of the wonderful things are in there that maybe people don't realize are there. Because I think a lot of people, especially educators, probably think it's just a place where you type in a location and the globe kind of spins and then it zooms in and then you type in a new location and maybe you can look up a site that tells you where you can find funny stuff in Google Earth. But I think most people's knowledge doesn't go a whole lot further than that. So tell us some of the other goodies that are in there.
So let me speak first from an elementary school teacher perspective, right? So when you introduce students to Google Earth the first time, and I've learned that this is true kindergarten through even like seniors in high school and higher ed, the first thing that they're going to want to do is find their house, right? And that used to bother me so much because I'd be like, well, it looks the same as when you left your house this morning, right? Look, it's still there. But then I realized for younger kids, especially in elementary school, for a lot of them, like that's when they make that first connection that, hey, my house is on here on Google Earth. My house is a real place. What other real places in the world are there that I can use this tool to go and explore? And like you said, Jake, like, if you're reading a book, like maybe a historical fiction, nonfiction, whatever it is, like just even showing students where the setting of that book takes place for students who, just tend to learn better when they see the actual locations. It helps them make connections. Like you said, because ideally we would take students everywhere on these field trips. Sometimes you need to have a tech tool like Google Earth just to expose them to the content on a much deeper level.
Right. Yeah. And we know about like dual coding theory and things like that, where just reading the book, like if you can add to that some kind of real imagery of the place, that's going to increase the kids' understanding and comprehension of it by adding that in there. For sure. I agree.
And I used to travel a lot more pre-COVID. And when I would come back to the classroom, whether it was a class I was teaching in or a class I was coaching in, and I would ask the kids if they could go anywhere in the world, where would they go? And out of an entire class, there's probably half of their answers that I've been to. And so it was always my connection to them. So we used to, before we used to try to put everything on my maps and create where we've been and really showcase that. But one of the reasons we're all in love with Google Earth is because kind of everything Google Geo is funneling through Earth. But it's like taking them to the places you can overlay your images. So I would say, oh, you want to go to Australia? I've been there. Oh, you want to go to Dubai? Well, let me tell you a few things about that. And it was more, getting them to look outside of their bubble, because a lot of the kids that I work with rarely leave their neighborhoods or things like that. So it's just a way for me to connect with them. But as Donnie said, to get them just to see that there's a bigger world out there for them to experience. So I was thinking for you, Jake, in Google Earth, when you go to the Voyages, there's a section of layers. for my science teachers out there. And in that section of layers, there's all kinds of things you can explore. First of all, understanding that when you see weather and clouds in Google Earth, that's plus or minus real time in 15 minutes.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that accurate. Yeah.
And that when you get into these layers, you can see time lapses in Google Earth. You can search satellite imagery. You look at glacier coverage, 3D imagery. You can look at snow cover. You can look at current hurricanes and tropical storms. I don't have all these memorized. I'm scrolling through Google Earth as we speak, but it would be amazing if I did. But all kinds of things for science teachers to really tap into the kids' understanding of what it means to be a part of the Earth and what it means, what physical sciences are and what they mean.
Yeah, so let's break down a few of those things you mentioned there. So the first thing is layers. So layers are kind of like, I don't know how better to describe it for somebody who's never used it other than just calling it layers. But you go into Google Earth and by default you're just seeing the like a map, like a 3-dimensional map. Maybe some city locations are named on there, but layers are turning on or off other parts of it. Like I think you could turn off those city names if you want to, right? And you could turn on boundaries of countries and boundaries of states. But what you're saying is you could actually turn on things like the cloud cover and things like that too.
Those are like labels. Like and the cloud cover is like an option. And actually, I remember we were actually 3 of like 13 people who were at Google before Earth had launched. And we had said, you have to enable us to be able to turn off those clouds because we were there during a snowstorm and you couldn't see the US behind the clouds. I think the best example of a layer is one that actually is kind of newer, which is the time lapse layer, which you can enable under the layers menu, which allows you to use some of this imagery that's been available through Google Earth Engine, which is like the photography they've been taking from satellites over the past like 40 years. And, one thing I would say is I've learned so much from these two gentlemen just about like all different things related to geo. Almost everything I know I owe to them in that regard. And one thing that I always love about when we get to share about these different tools is certain things tend to stick with each of us. Like we each kind of become really passionate about this one particular thing. And the thing that I really love showing people is this idea of time travel through something like the time lapse feature, which basically allows you to take a look at a place and how it's evolved over the past like 40 years. And, in Google Earth, you could see that satellite imagery and how places change over time. So, Jeff mentioned Dubai before. That's a great example because that city basically was built out of the desert. And, if you go look at Dubai and look at the time lapse and enable that layer and look at it changing from 1980 to 2020, you see a city basically come out of nowhere. But this one little gem of a feature, and this one's not even part of Google Earth, it's part of Google Maps, is you can actually turn back the clock using Street View and look at not the change over time of satellite imagery, but the change over time of Google Street View imagery. So that's only been taking place, if you think about it, the Google Street View cars have only been really around since like 2008. But I don't think what people realize is it's not just trying to capture the Earth on Street View, it's trying to continuously update every place. So, you really have the ability to not just talk about history, but to let kids see it and experience it. And the cool part about the Street View piece is you can actually click in. So let's say I'm at a place and I'm looking back now at April 2011, for instance. Well, I can click in and now travel around Street View in April 2011 and walk the streets, quote unquote, and look at a place.
And one of the things, Jake, that I want you to think, when we talk about what Earth did and is in the process of doing, and then I'll turn it, Donnie is probably the biggest expert on this. So what they did is essentially they took what would be a very cool 3D map of the Earth, which is what you say. Like when you go to Google Earth, that's what you see. To actually see it spherically is cool because we're so used to seeing maps flat. So you see this spherical 3D, image of the Earth, but when we're talking, they've had content providers. Nat Geo, and that's why I said, this is right up Donnie's alley. Nat Geo, Canadian Geo, Nature.org. They've partnered with educators to create content. So this isn't just a 3D rendering of the Earth. It's literal layers upon layers of information for students, for teachers. You can play Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. There are games on Google Earth. And so I think it's very frustrating for the Google engineers to say, we've created this amazing thing. Why aren't enough people using it? And that's part of why Donnie partnered with Nat Geo and Google Earth. So I'll turn it over to you, Donnie, to
so
take us home.
When Google Earth first came out, Google Earth actually like predates Google Maps, right? It predates.
It used to be that software you'd install in your computer lab, and it would crash the whole network because
well,
such a
that's
bandwidth thing.
It was like $400 too.
Yeah,
really went with
for the Pro edition,
yeah.
right? But when it first came out, it was a separate downloadable app. So originally it just worked on PCs, and they added it to MacBooks. But when and then they came up with like an iPhone, iPad app, that you could use Android. There was an app. But when Google started pushing Chromebooks 7-8 years ago, like you could not download physical apps to it. It all ran on the cloud. And so like us Google Earth lovers that, we love, we love Earth, we love the planet, but, Google Earth has if Google Maps is designed for directions, like going from point A to point B, Google Earth has directions, but Google Earth, it's more of a tool. It's to explore, to almost to get lost, right?
Yeah.
And when Chromebooks came out, we no longer could use that function, right? Because it just didn't work on Chromebooks. And so 3 or 4 years ago, now I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, Google finally, released it from the beta and made it where now if you go to earth.google.com, like you now get the web-based version. But now, it's something that Chromebooks are the most widely used device in classrooms. And it's now a tool that is available to every student, where, there are some little tricks and stuff to it. And like any ed tech tool, like there is some time where you have to sit down and play and explore yourself. But ultimately, it's a tool that you can throw questions at your class and give them time to explore, give them time to but anyway, so the tool itself, like it's very, very powerful, but it's not something that you as the teacher have to stand up at the front of the room and walk students step by step how to do it. It's very intuitive. It's a tool that if you come up with the right question, then students are going to be able to do some pretty amazing things with it.
I think the biggest takeaway for me, at least, has always been whenever we've told people, oh, we're running a geo workshop, so many teachers immediately check out. They're like, oh, that's not for me. That has nothing to do with what I teach. And our whole thing has been like, there isn't a subject out there that doesn't apply to what these tools can do for you. And not just Earth. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface talking about like arts and culture and just some of these other amazing resources that are out there. Earth Engine. There's so many tools out there that are part of what we call Google Geo, that it's my favorite thing to show, because even with subjects like math, you could be hands-on about using the tools. And actually, weirdly enough, my favorite place to go is Fenway to show some of I designed a whole series of lessons at Fenway using, showing the height of the monster. And there's so many different things you could do with it for any subject at any grade level. And it's really, I love that they just keep building and adding on to this, because I think that over time, this is going to become really one of the main places people go to explore content, within our classrooms. And the great part is it's kind of remade what we think of what a field trip is, because we could do a field trip whenever we want and do an actual exploration of a place and do experiential learning.
Well, and it's trying to redo presentations as well, Jake. So they've added projects. That's their most recent addition, projects, where you can think about your Google Slides or PowerPoint on steroids, where you can bring in your own content. You can add 3D imagery. So essentially, it takes the best of what My Maps had, which was part of the G Suite, Google Suite, whatever the heck it's called now.
Google Workspace.
I know. And that's going to be going away because they're moving to projects.
Right.
And then there was the Tour Creator, the Tour Builder, all deprecated now. Everything's being funneled towards Google Earth. So if you are one who used it in the past or went to a workshop 5 years ago and you're like, I love Tour Creator and I want to be able to do that, or I loved My Maps, Jesse showed me something cool, all of it is now laid on top of Google Earth. Right. And then for you, Jake, to as a science teacher, Google Earth Engine has data upon data upon data you can get and analyze with your kids. So if you got to that point where you really wanted to look at things, and that takes, 18 different satellites since 1984-ish. All that satellite data is dumped into Google Earth Engine. And that's so cool. you can look at talk about timeline. That's when we first found out about that. There's a timeline feature in that is just absolutely amazing.
Well, so let's break down those two different things there first. So first is projects. So a lot of people about a year or so ago were really brokenhearted about both tour creator and tour builder kind of around the same time kind of started being announced and being deprecated. And I think the one that was my favorite to recommend was probably I mix up which one was creator and which one was builder, but I think it was tour builder where you kind of had the different panes on the screen. There was like the map, and you could put a picture, and then you could do an order, and it would be a line going across the map, right?
That whole thing can be done in projects now, yeah.
Right, and in a much richer way, right? Because of what you're bringing in with having Google Earth there.
But it's all integrated.
And you can collaborate on it, and it can be collaborative, Jake.
It's collaborative. It integrates really nicely with Classroom, where it can be attached as directly into Classroom. No.
Well, you can't. It doesn't have to make a copy for each student.
No.
Like,
but meaning if I wanted to create a project and then share it out through Classroom, it's really easy to do.
Yeah, it's just like when you make a Google Earth project, like so a Google Earth project, which is Google Earth for the web. Like the comparison is, remember when Google Earth first came out, we're all like, oh, let's have our students make tours. Remember, they could click around the Earth and record their voice talking.
Yeah.
It worked. It's a little bit clunky. Right. Sometimes kids only got like 2 points on their tour and you're like, okay, we're done. You're good. You've added the Eiffel Tower and the Great Pyramid. So let's move on. The Google Earth projects, like Jeff mentioned, it's the collaborative piece. It's the one where students can take that book report and instead of writing a 5-paragraph essay, they can write that 5-paragraph, summary of the book they just read and put it where the different events, each paragraph could be like a different location on Google Earth where that part of the story took place.
Who did the Google Lit trips back in the day? He was with
it's still around.
Jerome.
Jerome Berry.
You could essentially. I loved Google Lit trips. He actually came to our to the County Office of Ed in San Diego. Gosh, a million years ago when he was doing that, and all of that can be done now through Google Earth.
Yeah, I think one thing too, thinking about Google Earth, I always go back to something Eric Kurtz always says. One of Eric Kurtz's kind of sayings is poke a stick at it, right? You get in there and there is just so much stuff in Google Earth. And as I think it was you that was saying earlier, Jeff, it's not a tool that you're necessarily going to be using at the front of the classroom as the teacher. It's more you're going to ask a question or say it's something that we're going to investigate and let the kids do that. And you don't have to have expertise in all of the different parts there. They can poke a stick at it and explore in there, right? I see 2 people trying to raise their hand here.
I'm just making fun of Jesse because that's what he does.
I think the other piece of it is, we talk about students as content creators, and I think that these tools also encourage students to not just create content the way Jeff is talking about, but I know you never believe this, knowing the 3 of us, but we're all somewhat competitive with each other. And that even holds true with being contributors to the Google ecosphere as far as photos and things like that. And these 2 both taught me how to do 360 photography. But, one of the things we show is just even with your phone, you can use the Google Street View app to take 360 photos, which you can then mark up. You could add to the, into Google. And so we often encourage kids, take pictures of the places you go and come back and share that with your class. I'm going to tell you right now what's happening. Jeff is looking up how many views he has on his photos. Donnie doesn't have to look it up because he knows it because he already looked it up earlier today. So would you guys like to share?
So I'm at 40 million views right now.
What?
I told you knew it already.
As am I.
You guys are tied. You're neck and neck. Like there's exact equal amount of
how
views
many?
right now.
How many 40 million? What, Jeff?
I don't know. I got a notification like a month ago that I hit 40 million.
That's
so tell me about where are these 360 photos? Are people finding them through Google Earth or where are they housed that people are discovering?
Well, I honestly was looking up to make sure Street View was still viable because Google gave up the cardboard game. So Donnie and I wrote the seminal book on Google Cardboards and now it no longer exists. So I don't know if our book actually exists any longer as well. But a lot of that stuff is oddly, Google is such a scale company that if they can't scale something, they'll scale back on.
But Street View is still there because photospheres are still part of
That's what I was just going to tell. So
Yeah.
when you think Street View is Street View is Street View, so wherever they house their Street View imagery, it's accessible on every tool that's not deprecated. Because we used to have the cardboard that we would do the expeditions. You would have the cardboard where you could just go on Street View and you could put your phone in there. So all of that has essentially gone away, but you could still get that same experience through just regular Google Maps. You can get it through Google Earth. And am I missing anything, gentlemen? So
well, the easiest way to think about this for your listeners to think about this is if you go to Google Maps and you click on Pegman and you see these lines and these dots, and the lines are really the Google Street View car, right? The Street View car, right, is taking these continuous 360 images that are all strung together, and you could actually do directions with them. And actually, Donnie and Jeff have both created their own where you can actually stitch together those images as well. And Donnie, I believe, had his students doing that. The individual dots are single photospheres that were taken by someone and uploaded, and it contained the geo information so that it could be placed into the specific location.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the main part there is from the car, and then these things that you guys are adding through Street View kind of go into there too if it has the appropriate geo information attached to it.
Yeah, like if you have the Google Maps or Google Street View app on your phone, every now and then you might get I have an Android phone. I don't know if iPhones do this, but every now and then if you're in a spot, it might say, hey, welcome back to Trader Joe's. Would you like to add some of your photos that you took in the spot to Maps? And if you press yes, it gives you a list of options. You can just click the ones that you want to add.
I'm imagining my Trader Joe's pictures. Honey, do you want a box of these cookies or these cookies? Which ones are you want?
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. Is this the small spinach you want?
Donnie,
you might think it doesn't matter.
Images of those cookies. So,
yeah, you might think it doesn't matter, but
can choose.
Jeff and I were once in a restaurant in North Carolina, and he took like the dumbest photo from the front of the restaurant and uploaded it. And I think that's your most viewed photo. It's
no. All my most viewed photos are. One is one that I took at the Getty, but all the others are restaurants. And remember when we were in Los Cruces, New Mexico?
We went to like some hole-in-the-wall enchilada or something.
5 million views.
It's crazy.
I think you guys need to send me a couple links, if you don't mind, to some of these pictures, these 360 pictures, and we can pop them into the show notes for people to be able to check them out.
Oh, absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I want to kick over to Earth Engine for a second. So, Jeff, you were saying that there's all of these different satellites that are linked up. I don't know if you said 18 different satellites, and we're getting data from them. Like, what do you mean by data? That's not just imagery, right? What is that?
No, it is. They use satellite imagery. They use algorithms, and so it's basically trying to look at you can look at change over time. Quite honestly, my degree's in philosophy, Jake. So really going into the wherewithal of Earth Engine, you can get into their case studies. You can get into the platform and get access to data sets if you were one that wanted to run those data sets. So if you just do earthengine.google.com, the thing that most of us really highlight is you can go into the databases, which is the first thing that pops up. And in those databases, you can view every database they have, whether it's climate, surface temperature, weather, atmosphere. You can go into the databases that way, but to suck people into being interested in the data, we always like to use time lapse inside of Google Earth Engine. And that's where we've always went. And you can do two things. You can watch things scale over time, or you can watch things deprecate over time. So Dubai, Las Vegas, those are some of my favorite places to visit.
The Mendenhall Glacier is really good
to see growth, but to see decay. I don't even know where this is, but it's a widely known thing among us. The Aral Sea, which is, I believe, in somewhere in Russia, that is basically disappeared. And it's disappeared since the satellite imagery started being taken. So you can go in and time lapse that and watch this viable sea sort of disappear.
Interesting.
Even for what we talked about before, like seeing the change over time in Street View, when you think about some natural disasters that have occurred over the past decade or so, you can even go and see somehow these places where wildfires have occurred, how they've rebuilt over time, and to see different things. I mean, in New York, if you go look at some of those streets, all you see is a bank turning into a drugstore, turning back into a bank. So it's not like that. Right. It's really all that happens in New York.
But here's the thing. There's some powerful stuff that you can do with that, the changing of over time of those 360 images. Like, I mean, New York City, the earliest street view image they had from New York is 2005.
Times Square still had, I remember you and I checked that out.
You can go to, right now it's not One World Trade Center, but it's the Freedom Tower.
Right.
And you can go in 2005, view the old street view image. Then in the top left-hand corner, you'll see like this little clock thing. You can click it and you can watch.
It's like a reverse, like it looks like a turn back of the clock.
Yeah. You can watch over 16 years, well, in 2005, there's still lots of stuff in that space, but over time you can watch it turn into something beautiful and the memorial come together.
I think it was Jeff and I, we were looking at Times Square recently, and we were, because now Times Square is blocked off for commuter traffic, but back when they started filming, it wasn't recording that. So you could see some of these changes in time over these places. And it's so powerful now, and it's only like 13 years worth of data. Imagine what that's going to be like when we start to get up to the types of numbers we're talking about with the satellite imagery, where we have 40 years worth of data, where we can really start to look at change over time. And now it's not just history learning from a book. It's really letting kids see what some of these places are like. And, we haven't even talked about some of the things like Street View treks, which are places that Street View cars can't go to. And, people rent these backpacks kind of and go to all these places that are off the beaten path. And, Petra, Venice, doing it by Vaporetto or Gondola or walking the streets, all these different places the cars can't go. It's not just about the Street View car. It's about just capturing these images as a series of parts of a journey. And I think, the goal is to basically map the entire Earth so that, kids can experience any place on Earth from their classroom.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so much more than that too. Just outside of the classroom, imagine what we're going to be able to use all this data, all this imagery, and all this information for in other sectors of our society, right? Not just in education. So certainly it's amazing for education, but for decision making and for seeing, the processes and the things that happened over the years. I mean, it's going to be huge. Whether just in science alone, but in a lot of different aspects, this stuff is going to be huge, and decades from now, we can look back at this kind of stuff.
Definitely.
So one thing before we wrap up, because I don't want to take your guys' whole night away from you, because you're gonna have to put up with me again tomorrow night to prepare for the partial credit episode. But before we tie a bow on it, I'd like to hear, so outside of Google Earth, what's your, kind of lightning round? What's another geo tool that you would kind of hype people to? Are there other ones that maybe aren't as big as Google Earth and aren't as amazing as Google Earth, but deserve merit, deserve mention here too?
Arts and culture.
Arts and culture. We got one from Jesse. Jeff's raising his hand. What would you throw in there?
Just the regular old Google Maps with the lists. I absolutely love Google Maps lists. So you're going to a new place, or you can have kids create a fictional field trip they're going to go anywhere they want, and you can create lists inside of Maps, and you can actually have those sent to your phone. Jesse would Google the most Instagrammable spots in Los Angeles and then create a list on it and then get there. When I spent 72 hours. I spent 72 hours in Tokyo with my friend Cindy, and literally we created this list and just tried to hit every possible spot that we could, and the list made it amazing. But I
call Jeff when I'm traveling, and I'm always like, "All right, I'm in the car." He's like, "Where are you?" I'm in the car traveling from mural to mural and basically hitting up all these spots. And yeah, the lists are great
Jeff
for that.
Calls from the phone. It's so annoying because he always does it from the Bluetooth, and it sounds like he's calling from the bottom of a well. It's awful.
What's he talking about?
One of these days, he will be calling from the bottom of the well, and you'll have to save him.
That's right.
That was actually a My Maps feature before, right? Is that something they moved over to Google Maps as My Maps kind of phases out that list thing? Because I can remember going to ISTE years ago, and I had a My Maps list of like where my Airbnb was and where the best cheesesteaks were and where the different events were and stuff like that.
Yeah, My Maps isn't going away anytime soon because Google Earth, the Google Earth projects, they're not embeddable. where my maps are. And there's so many companies that like when you go to like their web page that they have up there, it's usually a My Map or a custom Google map that's up there.
See. That's interesting. And so then Google Arts and Culture that you named, Jesse, that kind of has become the repository, not only for some other stuff that was really rad that was already in there, but that's kind of where Google Expeditions has gone, right? So all the stuff that used to be in Expeditions, a lot of it has gone that way. Is that accurate?
Some of them are there. Like, so not all of them came over. There are still some companies out there that are leveraging Expeditions content. Arts and Culture, though, is so rich. I feel like we would need a whole podcast just to talk about it. There's still every time I love listening to other people present on it because there's still other things I learn every single time. But if someone was going to go to Arts and Culture and just check out something, check out the experiments section because there's a lot of cool lesson starters there, or just really cool places for kids to experiment.
Well, do it with your phone. Do it with your phone because you can do AR experiment. You can see Van Gogh.
Oh, the AR stuff is really incredible
from the phone. So it's got content. You can do the art selfies, which are goofy fun. You take a selfie and it goes through all their database of famous pictures and pulls that up.
So like if you want to put Starry Night right in front of you, you can actually do that.
Yeah, the ability to do those virtual tours through MoMA, through any imaginable museum. And then also there is a ton for our social studies and English teachers out there. There's a ton of primary source content there. So
in Google Arts and Culture,
Google Arts and Culture. So
they partner with. I mean, it started off. Jeff talked before about Google Lit Trips. I mean, Arts and Culture started off as a 20% time project within Google, and it's just grown to the point where now they have just so many different partners and museums who are contributing content to it that's where they get a lot of this amazing content in some of these tours is they're getting fed this content directly from museums themselves who have been digitizing their content and putting it out there. It's really just such an amazing resource that's evolved over time and just keeps getting better.
I love that. That's cool. Any other tools you would throw out there to add to the list for the listeners?
I got a fun one. It always feels really awkward typing in, but if you go to thetruesize.com, it's kind of a fun little site. A lot of people who teach geography maybe have seen it before, but it's because the Earth, fun fact, it's round. It's not flat. But when you go to the true size,
Kyrie Irving.
Right, don't tell Kyrie.
Right, don't tell Kyrie. Hashtag Team Flat Earth. But so when if you want to see the actual size of, say, like the United States compared to Africa, or if you want to see how large Antarctica actually is, you go to this site, and then in the top left-hand corner, it'll say the true size of, and you type in a country. I'll or a continent. I'll do Antarctica. So you search for it, and then
by the way, we're getting a live guest. Something useless is Donnie Piercey found online, only it's not really useless. But this is what happens at our show every episode.
Yeah, this
Donnie
is great.
Gets to show off a little tool.
So when you search for something,
Donnie's full of little tools.
I am. Shut up, Jeff. But anyway, so when you search for something, it'll highlight it. Then you can click and drag it around the globe and actually compare it to the size of other continents, places, whatever.
Well, Jeff, and Donnie, that's like one of the coolest things in My Maps, right? You can outline something and then move it over, and it gets bigger or smaller based on because it's the Mercator projection.
Yeah. Except this actually traces the whole country for you. You don't have to do it.
I like doing the tracing.
I know, it's a great demo.
That's right.
Yeah, that is cool, especially if you're teaching about I forget what it's called, the Mercator projection. Is that what you call it, Jesse?
Yeah.
To be able to see, because it's hard to see those sizes on the globe there. I like that a lot.
There's some fun math connections you can do with that too. Like if you're teaching ratio, right? How many North Dakotas can fit inside of Texas? Like those type of questions, just to kind of, it's just a fun way to use kind of a quirky little tool. To have students problem solve in creative ways.
But that's the cool connection piece back to math, right? Is that you can actually do a lot of these things and have them experiment, whether it's through maps, whether it's through My Maps or Earth. There's all these different measurement tools that go in it, which is why it's always so frustrating when people are like, "Oh, geo's not for me." That's just not something I'm going to do.
Which geo? Geometry?
Right. It's all part.
Geo is not for you.
It's all part of what these tools do.
Much geometry.
We talk about real world connections connections, and there's no more real world connection than the real world, just digitally through these tools.
By the way, 3.7.
I guessed 4. Did you hear me guess 4?
We heard it.
Yeah,
it's recorded.
It's recorded. Wait.
And,
you know what?
Are we talking about North Dakota or Donnie's little tools?
Jesse, so when you were talking about the real world, every time I hear a real world connection, I'm like, I always like road rules so much better than the real world.
People stop getting polite and start getting real.
Start getting real. This is the true story.
That's right.
This is the
true story.
I think this is as close as an educational podcast ever comes to the real world. MTV series is me chatting with the three of you guys. This is the true story. And
you really did a nice job of relatively keeping us on task. So that was a big ask by you, and you were able to pull it off.
You know what I feel like it was? I feel like the principal was in observing me while I had the bad kids in class, and like everybody behaved super well while the principal was in the room, and then they left, and I was like, "Thank you guys, I'm so proud of you."
Thank you. I'm going to give you extra recess today.
That's right. You guys earned extra recess today. And just for that, when I'm on the Partial Credit Podcast, I'm going to be super well behaved for you guys. Or would you prefer I not be? What's better?
You go with the flow. You.
Yeah. We bleep out Jeff at least 4 times an episode, so you're good.
Nice.
We've definitely had guests on before, though, where in the middle of the interview we're like back channeling and we're like, I think we're scaring them. Like I think I think they're nervous because we're just overwhelming them, so we have to take it back a notch.
I think I will be fine. But I think a lot of duct tapers, a lot of educational duct tape listeners are going to want to tune in, not just to hear me
to find out which 80s song is
right? To find out what 80s song is my favorite 80s song. I already know my answer for sure. But also to other episodes to hear. I like that we got to showcase both parts of what you guys do, which is number one, you have fun, you have that rapport with each other, and you like to goof around. But then, I mean, we started talking about Geo Tools. I mean, you guys came on strong with the information there. That was a lot of really high quality information. I could tell we could probably go for another 2 hours, and you guys would have more stuff
for another
to
2 hours. We love the Geo stuff.
And I think that's a great reason to turn in
and go and look here and do this.
I saw you guys. You're trailing every now and then, looking at Google Earth off on your other screen. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for being on here tonight, and for sure, I'm excited for part 2, as they call it in the Hot Shots world, right?
Nice.
On the Partial Credit Podcast.
Good reference. I appreciate that reference. That was fun.
You say do or duh?
Duh.
Duh.
Part duh.
Wasn't that the one where like? Oh, never mind.
That was.
It was
like
the Top Gun.
It was Hot Shots. It was like Hot Shots Part Duh or something.
Yeah, but he was like the commando in Part Do, right?
I don't know.
No, it was Hot Shots. It was like the Rambo spoof, yeah.
No, Hot Shots was the Top Gun spoof, but then they did Hot Shots Part 2, which was like Schwarzenegger's Commando. It wasn't flying.
I thought it was like Rambo. Because I thought it was like a First Blood thing.
Yeah, which is like
that's Rambo. That's not Commando. What are you talking about? First Blood was Rambo.
I know it was Rambo, but it's an action movie. It's like in the jungle action movie.
But you corrected me and said, no, it's not Rambo. It's Commando. It's First Blood. We have a recording of this. We can go back and actually listen. Listeners, you're with me.
It could be both of them. Romando.
All right, guys, I got to hit stop on the recording now.
All right, well, don't forget to tune in to Partial Credit to hear our special guest, Jake Miller, share about his new book, his favorite 80s song, and we have a little treat. We're actually going to do a little time travel on our own, but we're going to do it EdTech style.
So check us out, partial.credit.
That was so much fun. I hope you made it through that long interview. I think it was well worth it. I think you'll agree. Lots of fun. I think those 3 goofballs would have gone for another hour if I let them, which is good because we then hopped over into their virtual studio and recorded an episode of the Partial Credit Podcast. Now, we didn't talk more about Geo Tools on that one. We talked about some tech integration ideas. We played some more fun games, and we unveiled my favorite 80s song, which I'm sure you're super eager to hear about. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But before you jump into that Partial Credit episode, I have 2 things to share here. First, a quick summary of what we learned today, and then after that, the celebration of the adjacent to possible. I think this summary is going to be almost as long as most interviews on the podcast because there was so much good stuff in there. But I think this review and reviewing like this helps us focus in on what we want to remember. That's why I take into doing this on the podcast. A couple of years ago, I started doing this. I think it's a good way to latch back onto certain ideas that we want to, focus on and research more. So we focused today primarily on Google Earth. We talked about students finding their houses as a good way to start off, finding settings from books as a good application for it. We talked a lot about using the available voyages in there, exploring the available layers, which I think is the best tool in the science classroom, although Voyages is pretty awesome too. We talked about figuring out where in the world our friend Carmen Sandiego is. We talked about creating Google Earth projects, which are kind of like the old Google Earth tour creator, the old Google tour creator, but souped up with the power of Google Earth, of course. And we talked about even more with Google Earth. But then we also touched on using Google Maps Street View and the idea of contributing your own images, even 360-degree ones, to Street View. Jeff got me all excited about exploring the data in the Google Earth engine, which, again, I think us science teachers like myself, we're going to, really enjoy the stuff that's in there. That data and stuff like that could really be leveraged in the science classroom and elsewhere, but definitely in the science classroom. And we touched on some other apps and tools like Arts and Culture from Google, Google Maps Lists, My Maps, Street View Treks, and the website thetruesize.com.
Hi, my name is Melissa Dills. I'm a tech integration specialist at Lake Local Schools in Ohio, and I love the book by Jake Miller called Educational Duct Tape. And right now this is hanging on my door. Well, I took it off, but this was hanging on my door because this is the book that I am just finishing up. And one of the things that I told my colleagues is that it's funny, inspiring, and relevant. And you don't find that a lot in books nowadays, but to talk about tech and still be relevant is amazing, I think, in a book. And Jake Miller does that with tons of wit and comedy, with great stories of himself, his family, his colleagues, his students, all kinds of people who have used these tools, and lots of great stuff in there. So I think you'll love it. I think your colleagues will love it. And no matter how much or how little you know about tech, there's something in there for you. So check it out.
Last but certainly not least, time for my favorite part of the show, which is the celebration of the adjacent possible. As I've mentioned before, adjacent possible is the idea that whatever you do, whatever you try, whoever you talk to, whoever you listen to, wherever you go, opens you up to new adjacent possibilities. Things that are possible for you that are right next to, just beyond where you currently are right now. They are adjacent possibilities. They are adjacent to what you're already doing. And these connections and discussions between me and me and the guests, and you, between duct tapers, between educators, those open up all of our adjacent possibilities. And for today's celebration of the adjacent possible, I want to focus in on a tweet that came to me the other day from Kyle Nemus. I don't do a good job of keeping the tweets where people ask me questions for use in this situation. I really need to get better at that. But this one, it came through and I was like, ooh, we should talk about that on the podcast. So Kyle, who's an absolute EdTech rockstar, you got to follow him. I'm going to put a link to the tweet in the show notes. Click on it, go check out the tweet, and then follow Kyle while you're there. Kyle is awesome. But his question was, so he does all of his lesson plans in a Google Doc, and he has a certain spot in the Google Doc that he labels as like current lesson or something like that. I forget what he had on it. And then he bookmarked that spot. And then up at the top of the page, he put a link to the bookmark, which is a wonderful thing to do, by the way. If you didn't know about that, you could bookmark a spot in a Google Doc. I think it is under Insert and then Bookmark. Yeah, highlight a spot, or actually, I think wherever your cursor is, go to Insert and then Bookmark and then put it there. And once the bookmark is there, you'll see that you have a little button on that. I'm going to click it on my screen here so I can remind myself what it says. Okay, so you'll see it, a picture of a bookmark pop up next to it, and then it says the word bookmark, and then it has like a copy symbol, like the two rectangles to mean copy. And then you copy that link, and you could paste that link somewhere else on the doc. And so what he did was he found this spot where he was currently teaching from, and he put a bookmark there to say, this is where I'm at right now. And then he linked that to the very top of his Google document. And then every day when he opens up his lesson plans, he clicks that bookmark and then jumps down to where he's supposed to be, which is where the bookmark actually is. And actually, or so that's what he thought would happen, which is an amazing idea and a great way to do it, Kyle. But what he discovered was, which I didn't know, so this is adjacent possible for me right here, is that when he then moves the text current lesson to the next day, which was his plan, he would keep moving it down the lesson plans to the next day so that he always would be able to jump down to there. He discovered that when he moved it down, he would just like cut it and paste it in the new spot or click it and drag it to a new spot. That then the link up at the top of the doc no longer worked. It was no longer the same bookmark. And so it wasn't working anymore. So he asked the question to me and some other people on Twitter, what do I do? How can I resolve this? So my first thought was, don't move that bookmark. Don't move the current lesson spot. Just take stuff that's below it and move it above it. And, like if you down below that have, tomorrow's lesson, then after tomorrow, cut that and paste it above your current lesson spot. And in my testing, that actually works. It's a little bit tedious because you got to scroll down there, you got to cut it, you got to move up, you got to paste it. And he's using a table, so you probably have to add some rows to the table and put it in there. So I think it's a little bit clunky, but it would work. But one thing I didn't think of that multiple other people reached out with, there were at least 3 people that I saw, Christina Di Maselli, and again, guys, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing names here, Ray Burks and Jolie Boucher all said, Kyle, use the table of contents. And I've used the table of contents in Google Docs a number of times, but I never thought of this. So also under insert, I believe, is that where table of contents is? Yeah. Under insert is table of contents. And one of the 2 versions of table of contents is the one with links. And so the suggestion was, put a table of contents up at the top of your document, make the spot where it says current lesson, make it, instead of normal text up on that toolbar, make it a heading, because that's what the table of contents pulls in, are the headings. And then your table of contents will have a link to that heading, and then you can move that heading anywhere you want, and then just go back up and refresh the table of contents, and it will update automatically. So the trick is, make your words where it says current text, change it from normal text to a heading, add a table of contents at the top of the document, and then every time you move that current lesson text, refresh your table of contents at the top. There's a little refresh button, and the link will work. So every day when he opens it back up, he'll just click refresh in that in that table of contents, click the link, and it'll jump them down to the right spot. And if you're curious about how to do it, Christina, one of the 3 people that responded, actually recorded a video for Kyle and put it into her response, which was amazing. She created a quick 1-minute long Screencastify, which just shows, number 1, the power of a tool like Screencastify, but number 2, the power of the adjacent possible. How awesome is it that Kyle asked this question and within an hour had like 7 people respond, had 2 different options for how to go about it, and one of the people had actually recorded a video for him for how to do it. That is the adjacent possible, folks. If you've got a question, tweet it to me at Jake Miller Tech. Email it to me, jakemillertech@gmail.com. Submit it on the show's Flipgrid, flipgrid.com/edu duct tape, or record a message on my SpeakPipe page, speakpipe.com/edu duct tape. Those links, of course, are also in the show notes. I can't wait to hear your questions. All right, before we shut the books on this episode, shut the books, is that a thing? Before we close the book, before we wrap this up, before the bell rings? Before the bell rings on this episode, I've got to assign you with your homework. I've been giving you guys homework for the last year or so, and I know some of you would be like, Jake, where's the homework if I don't give you homework? So your homework for today is to find a colleague or a teacher somewhere else, a teacher who enjoys corn mazes, because I kind of enjoy them. I don't know if I enjoy them. My kids enjoy them. We went through, I think, 3 corn mazes this fall, and who knows, fall's not technically done yet, so there might be more coming. But find a teacher who enjoys corn mazes and tell them about Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Tell them next time you're in a corn maze, pop in your AirPods and listen to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. You might get lost in the maze, but you won't be lost when it comes to EdTech integration. Well, I think I hear my mom calling me in for dinner, so I'd better go inside. Before I leave, a reminder, if you'd like some stickers or to pass some out, there's a link in the show notes. And we'd love to have you in the Duct Tapers Facebook group. And if you haven't done it yet, I'd love to have an Apple Podcasts review from you. Thanks for all that you do as a listener, as a lifelong learner, and as an educator. Have a great day, and I will see you in a fortnight, thereabouts.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please consider rating and reviewing the show on your favorite podcast app. #EduDuctTape.
At the end of the last episode, I shared about the online resource hub that is a free companion piece to the educational duct tape book. You know, a spot to find curated videos and resources for each tool that I discuss in the book, plus updates as their offerings change. Well, remember that? Well, I left out one piece of the hub when I described it. It's also a place where duct tapers, the book duct tapers that is, can discuss, share, ask questions, and even, as our Paw Patrol friends say, yelp for help. Yep, you can comment within the hub to share your own takeaways or resources and to grow alongside those other readers by asking those questions. I always loved the sharing and connecting that went with the hashtag #EduDuctTape Twitter chat. I don't know if you remember that. It was a lot of fun. I miss those. So I wanted to channel that in the book. Grab your copy, head to the online resource hub that's linked in the book, and start connecting with other like-minded educators.